Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ark Podcast, episode 14. We have a very exciting episode today because we have the second debate. And the second debate is between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. There was a coup that took place in America. Joe Biden was culled. And we've got a very interesting situation now where Donald Trump has basically been given all of these pointers from Kamala Harris on what her history is as the DA in California. So we'll be breaking that apart. But to help me meander through this 90-minute debate on ABC, I have Shakeel Latimer. Shakeel is someone who has a lot of connections in America. He's got a finance background. But Shakeel, do you mind giving us, the audience, just a little bit more of a background to yourself?
Yeah, look, I started my career, if you want to call it that, in finance as a stockbroker, futures broker. I made a bit of money. I went to Switzerland a handful of years ago, and COVID hit, had to come back. And yeah, I've got a few business partners now. We trade the markets, and unfortunately, because I actually don't really like politics that much, but what politicians do affect economic conditions. And so the US being the biggest market in the world, you have to pay attention to what's going on over there. And it's been difficult these last few years to keep an eye on what they're up to.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't want my audience to assume you're like we agree on everything. One of the really enjoyable things about our conversations off camera is that you're not yes man. You're like, no, Joel, you know what? I think I need to push you on a few things, and there have been great things you've made me think about, like for example the abortion debate. But look, I want to get into this particular debate and get your insights. What was your feeling after the last debate with Donald Trump and Joe Biden?
I mean, it kind of went the way that I was expecting it to go. And it just, to me, when you hear Democrats and people that looked like they were really stunned, and I'm like, how are you stunned? Like, the whole world has been telling you for years that Joe Biden looks like he's getting older. And he may well be a nice man. I mean, people say to me that he's a nice guy. That may well be the case, but that's not relevant to being the president of the United States, the leader of the free world. So, to me, it's like you've gaslit the public so much for so long. You've lied. You've dismissed what's happening. Joe Scarborough said on MSNBC, Good Morning Joe, he said something along the lines of, "This is the best version of Joe Biden ever." I mean, how much do you want to gaslight people? Karine Jean-Pierre says that Joe Biden is, that these are cheap fakes when he's, looking off blankly into the distance.
Cheap fakes.
At some point, you have to be honest with yourself. And if you're not prepared to take the feedback from voters, and I think the big issue to me is that they're constantly telling people that if you say anything, that you're some far-right conspiracy theorist, you're off on the deep end. And the problem with doing that is that a lot of the time that people are saying stuff, they're actually people on your own side. They're people who are independent or former Democrats or current Democrats that would vote for you, but they're not because you're telling them that they're all crazy.
Yeah.
So I was just really surprised that people were so shocked that Joe Biden put on the performance that he did. What were they expecting? We all thought that he was going to perform that way. So you'd have to be under some sort of delusion, not to expect that.
Well, I mean, I'm reminded of the comments from Van Jones, if you remember Van Jones, and he was just like sad. He was distraught. He felt that this is how could this happen? How long have people known? Like they wanted to launch like a royal commission into what had happened with Biden. It's like, this is a coup, what's happened. Now, look, I don't know if Van Jones got marching orders or if all the other commentators got marching orders, but this was clearly a coup. They basically removed the president. Like, as of this moment, Joe Biden is still the sitting president. He still commands the military and the nukes. Yeah, we've forgotten, haven't we? So I wanted to actually get your thoughts on this particular prediction from Vivek Ramaswamy. I haven't shown this to you yet. He says, if Kamala underperforms tonight, I predict some very strange things could happen in the coming weeks. Last time they swapped out Biden as the nominee. Next time it could be even bigger than just swapping a candidate. I mean, this drama, is there any credence in that? He has been right in the past.
Look, possibly, but I've got to be honest with you, and I have no evidence to back this up. This is pure speculation on my part, but I don't really think that anybody in the Democrats thinks that she's going to win. I don't think so. I think that what they're trying to do is protect their down-ballot votes because, there was talk after that debate. people were talking about New York flipping. I don't think that was going to happen, but New Jersey certainly could. Virginia certainly could. And that's what I think that they're concerned about is, one, how big of a win Trump will have, and two, those down ballot positions,
right?
Because that's going to affect them.
What does that mean, the down ballot positions?
So because they have a president as opposed to us where we have a prime minister, same as Canada and the UK and many other countries, we vote for our local member in the House of Representatives, and the leader of whatever party has the most seats becomes the Prime Minister as a general. That's generally how it works, except with the Labor Party, who gets away with 30% of the vote, but we won't go into that. Now, in the United States, you actually directly vote for the president, and what that means is that you can actually vote for, example, you can vote for a Republican president, but you might actually vote for a Democrat House and a Democrat Senate. So that's a quirk of US politics that we don't have here in Australia.
Yeah, so. I was going to say with the down ballot votes, how does Kamala specifically protect down ballot votes? Is she like have a lot of clout with minorities? Is that what it is, or?
I think that the issue is that going into elections, and even here, most people, I generally will number everything, number the whole lot. Yep. Most people are just going to tick one. Yep. So a lot of people will vote for the president and then vote for the same parties.
Right.
But sometimes people will only vote down ballot and not bother voting up ballot, or the other way around. And I think what they were concerned about was that the Democrats were in a spot of bother. Joe Biden wasn't very popular. People felt like they were being lied to, and that could cause them to decide to actually give a bigger lead in the House and a bigger lead to the Senate to the Republicans. Yeah,
I was looking at the debate with the debate prep that Kamala was giving Trump. I thought it was quite interesting with the fact that, Trump's gone to Kamala and we've got this Avengers team sort of forming. Vivek, Kamala,
Tulsi Gabbard,
Kamala, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. The idea that this is happening is insane. It's exciting. People are here for it. This debate, by the way, guys, it's not just us yarning. I'm very eager in the next 2.5 minutes. I'm watching the screen, so as soon as it comes up, I'll bring it up for your convenience, so you don't have to go finding the ABC stream or the NBC stream. But I wanted to ask you about Kamala's history. We had a very interesting discussion with an American about Kamala's history, and it was almost as though they were in denial.
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole thing. I said, I used to be on the left, and we called Kamala the cop because when she was a DA, she used to go specifically after. I think she locked up 3,000 black men on low-level marijuana crimes. And the person we were talking with was in denial, and I will try and get them on the show, guys. I will leave it with me.
We won't name him because he's not here, but I'll say this: look, you're hearing things like she's got someone dressed up as Donald Trump for her debate prep. It's just to me, it's just funny. But the serious bit about this is, whatever her positions actually are, she doesn't really have the time, I don't believe, to really be able to get those positions out, because she's squandered the last month by not doing media interviews. She's done that one with CNN and that's it. And so 1 minute she's against fracking, next thing she's in Pennsylvania saying that she's not against fracking. 1 minute she wants to defund the police, next thing she's for the police. And she actually had a campaign ad where she was standing in front of a part of the wall that was built by Donald Trump. So they've said that Donald Trump has got a special present for her.
Yeah.
Fox was saying that maybe he's got an autographed hat or something, Make America Great Again hat.
Yeah.
I think maybe he'll just walk in with his policies and say, look, you're clearly struggling. Here, have some of mine.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I'm very, very curious, because you're right about the whole no tax on tips thing as well. I mean, she stole that. I'm really curious to see. This is a completely different dynamic. I mean, we've been having the Trump-Biden paradigm for about 6 years now. So it's actually quite refreshing as a commentator, to have, but the last debate we had, I had a bingo card, and there were 16 different options on it for Biden, and it was stuff like him sleeping or this or that. What do you think on a bingo card you could expect from like a Kamala Harris, debate with Trump?
I really don't know what to expect, but I'll say this: if she starts giving word salad answers and things like that, and let's be unburdened by what has been, I think the American people will say, let's be unburdened by what's just happened for the last 3.5 years.
Yeah.
She's going to have to explain a few things as well, like, I'm the candidate for change. Change from what? You're currently in government.
Yeah, exactly.
You're the vice president.
You could do it. Day one was like 2 months ago.
Absolutely.
When you kicked Biden, stabbed him in the back.
If Trump can tether her, make her the incumbent, so she's responsible for everything that's already happened.
Yeah.
I think that'll be very powerful. And for her to win this, I mean, the media will say she wins no matter what she does, but for her to win this, I think she's going to have to come back on him with actual policies, because that's what everyone's asking for. You can't just go out there and call him a felon. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think Trump's got some interesting vectors to attack. I think some of the things he'll probably say, and it's like, we've been to the border. He's going to attack her on saying, she lied about being to the border. She hadn't been to the border. She hadn't been to Europe.
She hadn't been to Europe. Yeah.
See, I think that is why he'd bring it up, because everyone's seen that. And on top of that, I reckon he'll bring up the fact that, she's been an enabler of Biden's, cognitive decline and not blowing the whistle or getting him removed. And I reckon there's going to be a decent amount of cackling when she gets struck with a very good question. I reckon the best hits will be when the cackles happen. And I think she'll probably definitely... I mean, his weak spots are like January 6th?
Yeah, look, that's a weak spot. But also I think because he can be quite aggressive sometimes, I'd like to see him be a bit more humorous, because there is a humorous side to him. And look, we all have our own sense of humour.
Yeah.
I'd love for him to give her like 2 first-class tickets to Europe. Say, look, I saw your interview. I'm so horrified you've never been to Europe here. Yeah. Just something like that. But that's not quite the kind of person he is.
Yeah.
I think that more sort of humorous, playful side of him will endear him to people. And the other thing is that the Gen Zs, the numbers are dropping. The numbers are dropped with black voters. The numbers are dropped with Hispanic voters. Really, she's got suburban, even black men. Like she's got suburban white women.
Yep.
Her numbers are dropping with college-educated people, but they're not saying it as openly.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, she does have some really serious issues. And also when they say in the polls that she's leading, and now she's trying to make out she's the underdog. The betting markets say that she's the underdog.
Yeah.
But the thing is that even if the polls are correct, when they say that she's like up by a point, given the margin of error, that means that Trump wins.
Yeah.
So the pathways for her to win this, I don't see it. And the other thing you've got to remember about the US is voting is not compulsory.
Ooh, guys,
would you be excited?
Sorry, they've just
welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
There we go.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start-up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns. We got masks. We did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce-back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices, is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before. He said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter, because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to, because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it, because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond. But I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v. Wade,
answer the question, would you veto?
You could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formally worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country, and they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down. All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
to stop
Harris,
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
Weaponized, please. This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
we do have a lot
that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So My values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States, and in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Don't lie.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400,
President
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you,
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking, let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy, because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right. You'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I said that sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls. And we have to have it. We have to have borders. And we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican. No
judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker, so he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is up.
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza? If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed
millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
There's your break. There's I got 7, 8 pieces of paper in front of me. The amount of lies that were in that whole thing, just off the top of my head, the Charlottesville lie. I mean, what's your understanding of that one? There were good people on both sides.
Politico debunked this. He made a bit of a mistake, actually, by referring to Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham. Right? But Politico, the left-wing fact-checkers actually debunked this. He should have brought that up.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, because so far, I mean, everyone's going to think I'm crazy. Just hear me out for a second. So far, I actually think that Kamala Harris is doing well, but she's doing as well as she possibly can because she's so unprepared. Yep. Like, and quite honestly, I mean, he had some zingers against Hillary Clinton. I think this is the best performance he's had so far. Right. So much so that if I was American and I was a Democrat, I might be saying, "Can you bring Biden back?" This is just awful.
No, literally. I'm trying to keep track of all the lies that she said and trying to debunk it in real time because these bloody moderators, the dude especially, he's called Trump on 4 fact checks, 4, but not one for Kamala, and I have at least 5 that I have verifiable evidence. Like, for example, she mentioned the Charlottesville thing. That was a lie. And Trump said, if you actually look at the full quote, that's not what happened. It's been dunked by, Politico. There was also the one about, police officers died. There was one that died, and it was due to a stroke. But they blamed it on him being hit in the head with a fire hydrant. Turns out it wasn't true. In fact, the District of Columbia chief medical examiner found that Sisnick had died as a result of 2 strokes, classifying his death as natural.
Look, the thing with those hosts, I'm quite surprised. They started off actually being okay. I was surprised, and then when they started doing that, I've got to say, Jake Tapper and Dana, is it Dana Bash?
I'm not sure. Yeah, that rings a bell.
The CNN debate. Everybody was worried that they'd be too biased. I actually thought that the hosts did a pretty good job. I don't know why they're doing this in the ABC, because if people want to hear your opinion or an opinion, they'll watch shows like this, right? They're supposed to be moderators. Yeah. The one point when he said, I said it sarcastically, and then he came back and said, well, I watched it. I didn't think it was sarcastic, something like that. We don't want to know your opinion, dude. You're a moderator.
No, exactly. And he actually lied about that. He said, in summarizing Trump's comment on that, he said that Trump didn't say that. What was it? That we were. Trump said we lost by a whisker, and when Trump answered, he said I was being sarcastic. And then when the moderator went to Kamala and he said, Trump said he didn't say that. What do you think? And it's just like,
that's not what Trump just said.
It's not what Trump just said. It's like, like he's not paying attention. He's just thinking, how can I nail him? But I wanted to show this clip because I know we've talked about it before, but I haven't played it on the show. Kamala said Trump needs to respect the rule of law. And I wanted to play this video from Kamala and Tulsi Gabbard because I think it's really fascinating.
Is a racist. What's your response?
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response?
So, yeah, I mean, where's the respect for the rule of law? She literally had to be forced to deliver that. And also, what did you think about that point about the whole... Because I was just looking at the NBC live stream now. They were saying Trump pushes baseless claim about immigrants eating dogs in Springfield.
Look, that does sound a bit... It does sound a bit extreme, right? But... Her response to the comment, though, I thought that was a bit out of order, but we've been expecting her to cackle at some point. That was the wrong time.
Yeah.
Like, when she smiled, when Trump said that he was going to give her a hat and she smiled, I actually thought that was pretty good, to be honest with you, because it made it look like she had a sense of humour. Yeah. And, she was... I thought that was good for her, but don't laugh at that bit. And then the ABC guy kept saying, hey... I asked the city manager, Donald Trump responded, but we've seen what people said on TV.
That we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for $250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify here...
They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, Trump, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President Trump, we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on
to
to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to respond.
President Trump,
No, the
President
former
Trump,
president has said something twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it, and we're going to replace it. But remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that, and you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health care system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed, for the first time, Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it. Pass his prologue in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
You made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said the climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
It's a 3v1. It's a 3v1. I got some cracker memes from the whole thing. I'm just going to bring up. What are your immediate thoughts on that?
You know, it's not even my country, and I feel embarrassed. Like there's two people that could be potentially the leader of the free world, which affects us, and one of them is Kamala Harris. And like I'm looking at the fact checks, and you know it's exactly what we were expecting. You know, Trump lied about everything and this and that, and she's amazing. Yeah, I mean I'll give her that. I think that she's done a better job in this debate than other performances. But this is as good as it's ever going to get. Yeah, like this is her at her best, and this is a better version of Trump than what we've seen before. Can you vote for this girl? Like I shouldn't call her a girl. Can you vote for this woman? Like, can anyone? Are people seriously going to vote for her? The betting markets have actually just put her into favourite. And I think that over the next couple of weeks, the media's going to say about how amazing she is and how Trump's a liar, and then she's going to get a slight bump in the polls. But the real people, real voters, they're not going to vote for this. No, there's just no way. No, and Trump has like. Watching Trump do this to her, it's kind of brutal, actually. He's clearly won this debate. The media won't tell you that, but he's clearly won this debate. Yeah. Look,
if you look at the screen now, these are some memes that are coming up from Twitter, thanks to Elon. So you've got Kamala and Muir, which is one of the, and Davis, who's one of the moderators, and you got this one where they're behind the stand and just trying to scramble to get it, and Trump laughing. And then
I think they're all pretty accurate.
Yeah, I mean, this one's hilarious. But no, look, Trump. I'll say this. I thought Trump might be on a better. He could be better. I really do. I think that he's been so used to debating Biden, and I think there are some things that he was probably had a bit of poor form on. I reckon he probably could have been more efficient on the abortion part. I think some of those fact checks from the moderators really got him, because she's said 6 lies while she's been on the stage, but only he's getting the 4 or 5 fact checks. That's a hard thing to get past. I mean, if you've got it's 3v1. It's 3v1. So in terms of the amount of time, he's outnumbered. And I've been noticing how long they've been allowing her, especially on the black question, where they said, Trump, what do you think about, your comments where you said she's not even black? And he was very, very slow on that one. Very slow to find his feet on that one. And then they afforded her 60 seconds, 90 seconds reply, but he was only 30 seconds. Anyway, I'm sure someone will do the numbers.
Look, I think on that issue, we'll probably talk about this after they come and give their closings. But I thought he should keep it fairly brief because he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And they keep Dems, and even the Labor Party here, or the left here, they keep bringing up race. They're the ones that bring it up. So then when you respond to it, what are you supposed to say? As soon as you respond to it, you don't agree with them. Oh, you're a racist. Yeah. I mean, what is he supposed to do? She has said previously that she's Indian, and then she says that she's black. Now, okay, she's multiracial. That's fine, but she grew up in Canada. I mean, there's just what can he do there? I think there have been times when he was a bit repetitive and sort of stuff like that, but that's his style. That's why I'm not going after her too much for being wordy in some of her answers and stuff. But just on substance and just the way that he's conducting himself and handling things and everything, I can't see people being enthusiastic about voting for her unless they're already on they're already made up their mind and they're going to vote for a Democrat no matter what.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas with him, I think there are going to be people who aren't really sure what they want to do, who probably would have seen that performance and went, actually, I think this is the guy that can sort out things like the potential of World War III, that can potentially sort out Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, etc. I don't think that can we trust her? I mean, when she went over to Europe and she's like, oh, I'm on the west flank or the eastern flank or wherever I am, and then she starts bursting a laugh, and we've seen her on the international stage. I mean, I can't see how anybody would feel comfortable and safe and secure with her in charge.
Yeah. No, it's insane. I think they're just about to do closing comments now, guys, so we'll just finish up with that and have a chat after it.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs, and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
I just want to see.
And welcome back to NBC News coverage of the debate. Pick your adjective. I would go with fiery to begin, but it goes from there. Both the candidates, you could argue.
All right. I don't want this spin. I'm just curious who they bring on, like Tulsi Gabbard or someone else too. So I'll keep an eye on this just in case they, and I'll unmute it in the event that they have someone that's actually worth listening to. What's your general takeaway from all that?
As I said, you know, I think that that's as good as you're going to get from Kamala Harris. As you rightly point out, Trump made some mistakes there. She made some mistakes there. I think when you look at it, I mean, that closing, that wasn't a great closing, I don't think, from Donald Trump, to be honest with you. There were some times in that debate where I thought, yeah, Kamala Harris has sort of done a really good job of it. The abortion one, for example, it's hard for me to pick a winner on that issue because what she said was, I think, actually genuinely heartfelt. I really do. I think that when she talked about the victims of sexual-based offences, when she talked about, you know, miscarriages and bleeding out and stuff like that, that was pretty emotive. It's a complicated, difficult issue. One of the weak spots that I thought Trump had was in IVF. I had no idea what he's referring to about the Alabama stuff, where he got involved in that. So that made him look pretty good, and I thought that his response was really good. So it's hard for me to say who actually won on that, and that's probably the weakest point that I thought he would have had, especially with women voters, is abortion. So, yeah, even if you say that she won that part of the debate, I don't think she won it well enough to be able to swing voters. And as he rightly pointed out, even if she became the president, she actually doesn't have the ability to go and change the rules. Right. So
it's confusing.
Yeah, it's a tough issue.
Yeah. She's saying that she can do stuff that she can't do. I thought his comeback on her, I mean, the question that he had back at her, which she didn't answer, was, would you greenlight abortions for 7, 8, 9, or after birth abortions? And she said, well, no, you haven't answered the question. It's like, okay, well, that's a nice dodge, but I think Trump, because you can't publicly say that, because she will lose too many votes. I think that's the calculation her and her campaign have made.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one. I'm not going to tell you what my personal position is on abortion, but I'll just say this. I think that Republicans have overstated what these rules are in relation to these late-term abortions. Okay, and I did actually look into this a little bit. I was like, are they seriously talking about, like, partially giving birth to a baby and then killing it? Is that seriously a policy? I think it's overstated and somewhat exaggerated. On the same token, I think the way that Democrats bring this issue up as if Republicans hate women, they just want to take choices away, and Republicans don't care if a woman bleeds out, is also overstating the actual real position that Republicans have. So it's a really hard issue. I'm glad that we're not facing that issue right now in our country. Whether you agree or don't agree with our rules, like, it's not something that's politically a thing at the moment. But yeah, America's just such a mess on so many different fronts.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think with Trump, one thing he was trying to highlight with that question was afterbirth, because he rightly pointed out that governor, I forgot the state, but that governor he mentioned, saying we'll discuss what to do with the baby after. I remember listening to that radio interview, and that is a problem. I mean, we do have that problem in Australia. We have this babies born alive problem where the legal question's over it, where if a baby survives an abortion and it's sitting on the table and it dies, even it's savable if you administer to it, but it'll die if you don't administer some health to it because you haven't done the abortion properly or whatever, you haven't killed it properly. Then the legal question there is grey. That's the problem we face in Australia, and I know Jodie from Babies Born Alive, love Australia. That's their main issue. It's not a question of abortion. It's a question of there's whole babies being born alive that from these failed abortions, and there's a legal grey zone in Australia, and I think that's what he was really trying to highlight. But also he was trying to get a firm answer from her on 7, 8, and 9 months, because there is a calculation being made from her campaign that they will lose if they're talking about almost full-term babies being aborted. And he did say, look, I believe in the rule of three, rape, incest, and one other. You should be allowed to do that.
Life of the mother.
Life of the mother, yeah.
Look, this is where I think things are perhaps misconstrued or misunderstood on this issue. I don't think that many people and Democrats, there could be some extreme people, I don't think that they're actually saying, let's have an abortion, if it goes wrong, we'll just work something out. I don't really think that's the position they're taking. And in the cases where abortions have been taken, we're talking about things that are happening like really last minute, 9 months in, things like that. Normally they're talking about where something catastrophic has gone wrong. The woman's in a coma, she's just been in a car accident, something like that, and the procedure hasn't worked properly, and the baby potentially could be saved, but there's other things going on with the mother. Now, in that set of circumstances, I think that expressing a fear that doctors would be worried that if they do the wrong thing, they could go to jail, that is a problem. I don't know how to fix that. I'm not going to pretend I do.
Make it legally clear. That's it.
But on the issue of like late-term abortions, just because you've changed your mind, you can't be bothered, or you don't want to have the kid anymore, I think most people have a problem with that. But I don't think anybody's having a reasonable conversation in the United States about this, because what's happened is Republicans have sort of gone to this, in some cases quite extreme points, 6 weeks, that's it. And Democrats have gone, yeah, to hell with it. We should be able to abort the baby, 5 minutes after it's born. This is not where the people are. But as I said, in relation to that part of the debate, I think that her response, plus, she is a woman, so it was a motive. I thought that was reasonably effective. To be honest with you, I don't think it's going to change the election. I think Democrats have been banking on that being an issue that was going to change the election. I don't think it would.
I think that's because they were basing it off what happened in, was it 2022 with the midterm elections, and abortion was a big part of it because Trump was the voice for it. So that's why they blamed Trump for that loss, actually. They ended up saying, we needed someone more like DeSantis, or, so they actually blamed that loss on Trump and that he didn't help those down-ballot candidates by going too hard on abortion.
But he rightly points out that Roe v. Wade has been a contentious issue in the US for decades, since it was first passed. And not only was it contentious, Democrats didn't like it.
Yeah.
RBG didn't like it. So, even though she voted for it, she didn't like it. She knew it was a problem when they passed it. Now, we can all have our different views on abortion, but I think the issue here is under the Dobbs decision. Do you want it to go back to the states so the people can decide, and you just have to respect that people will vote for things sometimes that you don't like?
Yeah.
Or do you want the federal government to pass a law? Or do you want the legislature to have nothing to do with it and just let the judicial branch create laws?
Yeah.
What do you want here? And I feel like, given the United States, the way the United States works and how their country is structured, this should be a states issue.
Yeah, I think Trump could have made that point a little harder. He did say it, and but I reckon he should have. There's a few times there where he should have gone on the attack more, but not aggressively. Like, he should have said, Kamala doesn't believe in democracy. What that decision did, what those justices did, passed it down to the states. I want to know why you don't believe in democracy. Don't you think states should have their own sovereignty? Don't you think that this left-wing state should be able to pass a very extreme version of abortion, just like you want? And don't you think Republican states should be able to do what they want? I mean, that's called democracy, and you're anti-democracy, and yet you attack me for being anti-democracy. I just felt like there were just times. Obviously, Trump's Trump. He's not, a 28-year-old, a 27-year-old bloke. He does very well. But I think, moving across to other topics, I really think there were some soft points there where he could have been a little bit sharper. I mean, another one was, he did Project 2025 pretty well. I mean, he didn't spend too long on that. They didn't spend too long on that. Bringing us together, he could have been way better on that. Before we went to the closing comments, she was saying, Trump's, divisive and this and that, and she was talking about the black, he's racist towards black people and all that sort of thing. I felt like he could have gone back and said, since Obama, race relations have been at a record low. He pushed race relations when he couldn't get bills passed through Congress. Similarly, Biden promised to bring the country together in his maiden speech, in his inauguration speech, and he's done anything but that. And so has she. They've turned Americans against each other. They weaponized the DOJ against the opposing president nominee, and on top of that, they've been going after parents that want better things in their schools. They don't want the LGBT books being put in front of their kids and indoctrination. Chapter and verse, and I'm sure there are other podcasts in America that can tell you chapter and verse, but he knows it. I know he knows it, but he didn't say it, and I'm just like, come on, Trump, come on, man.
He maybe was concerned about, like with Biden, if you come against Biden too hard, then you're going to look like a bully.
Yeah.
If you come against the first black woman presidential candidate, do you know what I mean? Like, maybe I don't know. I'm speculating, but maybe that was why he held back. When he used he obviously was waiting for a time to do it. When he said, "Excuse me, I'm talking now," does that sound familiar? That was brilliant, because not only did it turn the tables on her, because I'm sure that she was trying to find a place to do it, but also she interrupted him a couple of times, and then he said, "Be quiet" or something. So I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, it was good.
How much more aggressive could he get without alienating people, which is what people are saying, that he's a bully. So, we just have to be somewhat careful. I think he had to be somewhat careful about it. Just on that race stuff, and I think you and I have this in common. Probably more so me than you. Throughout my life, certainly as an adult, I moved to Sydney when I was 11 from Perth. I have never felt really like the race was an issue, and Sydney's been great. I love Sydney. So, and then I moved back to Perth when I was 20. Didn't feel like it was an issue then. And really it only became an issue when left-wingers started bringing it up. I think when you hear like the far left and they say that Trump's divisive, but then you actually go and talk to people, especially people of colour, which apparently I'm not in America, but everywhere else. America thinks I'm white. Don't get me started. But everywhere else I'm not white.
Yeah.
When you actually talk to people, they actually say similar things to me, that like, we're sick of this. Like, we're sick of, you're the first guy. Like, go away. Like, we don't want to bring this up. So I think that the divisiveness, people will say the divisiveness comes from the left. I mean, look at the Voice campaign here in Australia.
Yeah.
That was an absolute disaster for this country.
Yeah.
And it was very divisive, and they haven't given it up. They're now trying to get states to do what they couldn't get a federal referendum to do.
Yeah.
They're the ones that bring it up. Democrats in America, I know we're supposed to be talking about America today, Democrats in America, they're the ones that are doing this. They're the ones that are saying, hey, let's have segregated college graduation ceremonies for black people and people of colour. Okay, so do you think that ending segregation was a bad idea then? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
So I think Democrats have an uphill battle on that one, actually.
Yeah. No, look, I think it's a very interesting topic, the the question of race relations. I mean, if you look back when it came up, it was mainly 2011 where it really took off, because with the increase in social media use, we saw a lot of these buzzwords both in the media's articles but also in social media. It drove a lot of this traffic, including black men being shot by white police officers. And they found that the mainstream media found that these sorts of videos had a much better engagement, especially with women, especially with white women in America. And so they pushed more and more of that. In some of these shootings, they're old shootings, but it drove traffic to their ads through their articles and whatever. Now, look, no one here is saying that black men should be able to be shot by white police officers. That's silly. But if you actually look at the numbers, black unarmed men that are shot every year in 2020, I think it was or was it 2019? I think it was 16 were shot, and there's like 5 million or something police interactions every year that police officers have, probably more.
Just on that, sorry to interrupt.
That's right.
Just on that, these are automatically subject to review. Okay, it's really rare that it's an unprovoked. I mean, like George Floyd, we can argue about whether or not they killed him or whatever. People have different views on that, but the idea that I think Democrats are trying to push out there is that, like, a white cop can just walk down the street, see a black guy, just go bang. Yeah. That's not happening, right? That would be an extremely rare event. Now, do the police sometimes make mistakes? Well, as you know, I'm not a great fan of the police because, hey, I'm not a great fan of government in the first place, no matter who's in charge. Yeah. But I'm not prepared to say that. Like, yes, police make mistakes, but that's not happening in any significant quantity.
Yeah, that's right. And the idea that there's no willingness to change it, I mean, it's nuts. So the backlash was far worse. They defunded something like, or they lowered the funding for over 150 police stations around America, and it's not better. It hasn't gotten better. Race relations have gotten worse. There's more crime being committed now, so well done. But going back to 2011 when this all kicked off, thanks to social media, I believe in Tim Pool's theory about this, and many people that were there back then at the Occupy Wall Street protests against the banks when they were bailed out, and literally. But what ended up happening was we saw a situation where we did see it's almost like there's a meme of this guy saying, okay, now release the race relations thing to divide and conquer, because originally when Occupy Wall Street came up and it was the opposition to the banks being bailed out and all of that in America. Originally it was conservatives, it was libertarians, it was left-wingers all coming together, which they couldn't have in the establishment. They weren't allowed to let that go fly. So then we saw these big corporations, these banks, they really bought into this race relation stuff, this LGBT stuff, this black quota, woman quota, whatever, because it divided. Because if you're an individual person rather than a family, rather than a community, rather than a state and a nation, then it's easier to control you, pick you off, But if you're a part of a rock-solid community, a church, you've got two parents, you've got kids, and you raise them in the way that your parents were raised you, and that forms a church, and then that forms a community, a local council, state, and then federal. I mean, that's indestructible. And so when I look at that, I see that race relations are critical to the corporations and the government actually retaining control over the populace, and they can sort of curb any populist revolution coming up from the left or the right, like Bernie.
Yeah, I think right. You had to throw Bernie in.
I have to, yeah. Oh, Bernie pre-2017. So.
Look, I tend to agree with you. I think just for example with women's rights, I think it's important for women to be able to have the same jobs and the same opportunities as the rest of us. But I think that when women are told, hey, you can have it all, I don't see how, because I don't think that men can have it all either. Right, you at some point you have to make a choice between spending time with your family and kids or letting those years go past and working for the man, or the big corporation. So I think a lot of the ways that they do things is designed because, hey, corporations want women to have no children so that they can work more, right? And so if you can convince women that, hey, those men that do that are outperforming you, and so there's a sexist conspiracy against you, then you get that. But then you also, when you bring in quotas, the one that I always talk about is the quotas for the LGBTQ community, especially lesbians and gay people and gay men. Well, if I'm seriously, I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less what your sexuality is. I may not have the same sexuality as you. I'm straight, but hey, like, you do you, I don't care. What happens in your bedroom doesn't matter to me. Now, if you're now going to require me to have a quota, what am I supposed to do at the job interview?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to ask someone? Because I may not know, it may not be obvious what the sexuality is. I might think it's something, but it may not be. So do I then sit down with the person and say, hey, like, I really love your resume, you've got some great qualifications and experience, but by the way, before I give you this job, could you please tell me what you get up to in the bedroom? I mean, it's, like, how do you actually comply? And the thing is, I don't think that they want you to comply. I think they want to make it so it's impossible for reasonable people who previously got along, as you've said, to actually be able to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of that story where a female-led company didn't build Collapse Bridge. I need to double-check this, bloody fact-checking organisations.
So that was a disaster, right? But see, here's the thing. I don't think it was a disaster because women were running it. It was a women's-only company.
Yeah.
I think it was a disaster because it was lefty women that were running it.
Lefty women?
Yeah.
Well, hang on. What I believe is it was the fact that they lowered the competency for people to come in rather than wait a little bit longer. Don't try and break the ceiling. Just wait. Just slowly bring them in. You know, don't drop your standards like the military does, you know, where you got to be able to lift a man, but you lower it for women. Don't do that. You know, but I think that's what happened in that organisation. But again, I have to double check the stats on that because I've
and Kamala Harris made a comment about you know, wanting to make sure that the US military was the most lethal military operation. Well, look, it probably still is, but like seriously, you know, I mean, all this trans stuff and all this stuff. Again, I've got nothing against trans people, but you're forcing an issue that doesn't really exist, and you're upsetting people, and then you start to investigate some military members because they're slanted too far to the right, and then you accuse Donald Trump of being divisive. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
100%.
This is why I believe that there is a real possibility of Virginia flipping. I think that there's a stronger possibility of that happening than what the polls would indicate, because remember that there's a lot of military people and a lot of the military side, like real patriot government workers that work in Virginia or live in Virginia. And a lot of them are a bit older. So I could see it happening. People might put in the comments, Shakeel's crazy, that's never going to happen. But I actually think there's a real possibility of that happening. And on election night itself, there's the 7 states everyone's talking about, right? The Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. Then you've got North Carolina, Georgia, and the Silver State, Nevada, and Arizona. There was talk before about New Jersey. There was talk about Virginia when Biden was around, and there was some talk. I think it was unrealistic, but there was some talk of potentially New York flipping. But I'll say this: if Kamala Harris doesn't win Pennsylvania, I don't think that there is a realistic path forward for her. However, as far as I'm concerned, if Trump wins Virginia, if he flips something, the election's over. You could call it right then and there, because that would indicate that there has been a real change. And I think, politicians often say this is the most important election. They say that every election cycle in every country, right? But this actually is quite an important thing. And there's a part of me that hopes, my prediction is that if Kamala Harris wins, it's going to be razor thin. If Trump wins, it'll be a fairly big margin. It'll be a bigger margin than what people are predicting. But either way, I'd actually like there to be a big margin, because it gives us some feedback. Are people, am I totally out of touch? Am I living in a bubble where everybody I meet just agrees with me, and so I'm under some false sense of security, like I'm delusional here? And actually, people want higher taxes, they want more government control, that sort of, is that what people want? Or is it the case that the politicians are wrong and actually this is not what the people want? And if it's a really decisive victory for Trump, it sends a message. And I tend to think that that's what's going to happen, because we saw that in Brexit. People were fed up. We're seeing it in Germany. People are fed up. We're seeing anti-immigration movements in places like Sweden, right? You wouldn't expect it there, because people are fed up and the governments aren't listening. Same as the issues that we're having here in Australia. So when the people actually say something really loudly, which I think was what 2016 was, that was a very loud message to the political class that there's a problem and you're out of touch with the people. You need to listen to that and change course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Is Virginia when they say Virginia-class submarines, is that where they come from? Our Australian Virginia-class submarines. I'll double check that.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well, when you said military, I thought, oh, maybe they.
Well, because a lot of the like the Pentagon and like all those sorts of places are in Virginia. So.
Right.
Yeah.
I might check that out because as a state, they are obviously bordering, the ocean. It would make sense. But, anyways, going back to the whole question of how the debate went. I thought one of Trump's best attacks was one that I told him to do. I called him up and I said, Trump, you need to do this attack. It was the fact that, why didn't he actually end up telling? Why didn't Kamala actually end up telling, Biden to roll out of bed and, do what he has to do? I mean, the idea that, Kamala she's got 4 months left. There's a lot of these things that she says she wants to do, she could do, she has time. And it's like, well, if you don't have time, is it because Biden or is it because you're an ineffective leader or you don't have the numbers? I mean, I thought that point was really well made and quite humorous when he said that. He's like, the first time he made it, it was the best put. And I think it was very strong that he said that in his closing comments as well. The fact that he said, look, roll Biden out of bed and go get him to sign a bill, for Medicare or whatever, what are you waiting for? It was well made.
It was a good line. As I said, I think media's going to, say that she's won the debate. And to be fair, I think that she did a reasonable job of it. But here's the issue. Voting's not compulsory. The Trump supporters and the Trump base and the people that have flipped to him already, they're not going anywhere. Nobody's really like a diehard Harris supporter. I mean, she's kind of new to the scene. That there's been the whole mess that with Biden stepping aside, and then there was talk about should they have an open convention at DNC and stuff like that. There is a few people are a little bit unhappy about a few things, and so this is really the only chance that she's had. She had the interview with CNN. She's had this, and that's kind of it. I just don't know whether that's going to be enough to drive enthusiasm. So it may well be the case that neither of these two candidates will actually change anyone's mind, but it may be the case that the people that would vote for Harris maybe just don't. They're just not enthusiastic enough. They just don't want to. They just don't want to. I mean, there have been some elections here where I've just gone and just put in a blank ballot because I just don't like anybody.
Yeah. I was talking to this interesting guy the other day, Peter Archer, and he made the point that, look, Joel, governments aren't elected in, they're usually elected out. They're kicked out. So the incumbents usually have that problem where, they're thrown out rather than being given an extra term. If you can't say, which is the first question that Kamala was asked, are you better off in these last 4 years than before that? If you can't say confidently yes as a voter, then I think that sends a very powerful message to people in every community, especially the black community, because Trump failed to mention when he was attacked on the black thing, we had record low black unemployment. I mean, he should have quoted Dave Chappelle when Dave Chappelle said, look, Trump, he was attacked. They said it's the end of democracy. And you know what happened? I got a tax cut. And I thought it was the funniest thing, the way he put it. It was so efficient with words, a bit of a wordsmith he was. And when I see that, I'm like, yeah, look, I think people will vote Biden and Harris out. I think they're unhappy with them. It is Harris on the ballot, obviously, and there is a huge unanswered question of why she never gave a good answer, why she doesn't get some of this stuff done in the next 4 months. I mean, it's been 5-6 months since the last debate. It's been 2 months. So it was 5 or 6 months that we've known she's the candidate. They've had their convention and she's done nothing. That's 1/8 of the presidency. 1/8. Get something done. And I think people are asking that question.
She actually, there was an interesting moment in the debate where Donald Trump said something along the lines of, everybody knows what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut taxes. I'm going to lower regulations. Like, everyone knows what I'm going to do because I did it. And then she responded with, Donald Trump has no plan. And all of these top economists around the world says that what he's going to do is going to explode the deficit and there could be a recession next year. Look, I think that there's a possibility there could be a recession anyway next year. I mean, people were saying that last year. So there is a possibility that's going to happen because the US has got something also that wasn't brought up today, an enormous amount of debt. I mean, it's unfathomable how much debt they've got, right? And they're adding $1 trillion. That's almost the economy of Australia every 100 days. I mean, it's out of control over there.
Eye-watering, yeah.
Just put it in perspective, the unfunded liabilities, if you go to the debt clock, people say that figure's a bit inaccurate, but that shows unfunded liabilities of 170 trillion on top of the 35 trillion they already owe, plus they're adding $1 trillion every... This is craziness. And this, by the way, the Social Security Trust Fund and Medicare Trust Fund, that starts running out of money soon, like 2028, 2030, 2032. Like, this is just going to be a monumental problem. So Kamala Harris says he's got no plan, and this is what all the economists say. Well, then Donald Trump said something which I actually wasn't sure. I didn't know where he went. He went to the Wharton School of Finance. I didn't know that. I thought he studied something else. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, she's, on the one hand, she doesn't want to own the Biden stuff that for the last 3.5 years. She says that she's got this amazing plan, but nobody knows what it is. Yeah. Up until recently, there was no policy positions on her website. What I can't say, you know, when I talk to people, and look, I respect people don't like Donald Trump. I get it. Like, people don't like him. Fine. That's everyone's entitled to their view. But I hear when people say to me why they're voting for Donald Trump, they normally, and it's just been my experience, they'll normally say because of this or that, the CARES Act, for example, right to try. He strengthened the Environmental Protection Agency. There's a lot of things he got no credit for. He passed something to exonerate predominantly black men who'd been, convicted of like fairly minor crimes, doing life sentences, things like that. So he did a lot of things while he was there. And, he doesn't get an awful lot of credit for it. But when I talk to my American friends, they'll often bring that up when they're saying why they want to vote for him. When I speak to people who want to vote for Kamala Harris, I'll ask, okay, so like why? And it's sort of a trick question because they can't tell you what policies they like because she hadn't released any. But they'll say things like, well, she's a black woman. Or Donald Trump's, a horrible person. It's like, hang on, surely that's not what you should be voting for. They really struggle, I think, to articulate a good reason why you'd vote for her other than not liking Donald Trump. Yeah, that's probably one of the reasons that really doesn't give me entire confidence about America's elections. It's the fact that, I see that we've all seen these videos where it's like, okay, what do you like about her? And it's like, well, she's black. She's a woman. Can you name one policy you're excited about that she's doing? Nothing. Just complete nothing. We got to get Trump out. It's like, it works. What they're doing, it works. I mean, in terms of, forget about, saving America and the world. I mean, like, have we lost it already with this? Sorry to black pill the audience, but you look at that level of, no, look, maybe those are the only videos you see because it's skewed and people only share the stupid things. Maybe that's what it is. We're just seeing like a small sliver of the internet, and we're not seeing all those cuts that they did with the people that wouldn't get the views. Whereas, like, well, I think she was really good on XYZ. I think her no tax on tips thing was good. Maybe all that was cut out. That wasn't hers. That was Trump's. Exactly. But maybe that stuff never made the cut, and that's why I look at this and I'm like, okay, well, it's been procured by conservative people online with these videos that they choose to get up so they get the most views from their base. I mean, So more of my family and friends live in California than anywhere else. So I actually have some Republican friends in California. Yeah. But I do have friends all across the United States. So, yeah, I totally hear what you're saying on maybe we've got biased information from what we view online. But I've actually asked them, and this has been the sort of responses that I get from people. To more in-depth issues, it's very difficult, I think, for people to be an expert on everything. Unless you're a politician, then you know everything. But otherwise, it's very hard. And I know, for a little while, I was actually on some of the live fact-checking website. I just gave up because it was all Trump. It's terrible. It's just, what's the point? There's a few things that I sort of would like to come back against if I was a Republican, which I'm not American. But she made a comment about tariffs not working. Now, I actually tend to agree that tariffs across the board may not be that good an idea, but that's because I think it will actually end up hurting your exports. Tariffs on the goods of certain countries, if you think that they're being unfair to you, yeah, that may well be reasonable. But across the board, I'm not sure about that. But she made the point that these tariffs will pass on costs to consumers and drive prices up. this is coming from her and Biden, where inflation's it's been out of control. It's come down now, but the inflation that's been experienced has been massive. Now, I was in the United States last year. I went to like a fast food place. It was the equivalent of $40. We just got two burgers and chips and a drink, $40. I mean, I can afford that, but can the everyday family afford? I don't think that they can. Now, it's interesting because Democrats, Labor Party, the centre-left parties of the world often promote unions. And again, I totally understand where they're coming from when they say we need to increase wages because people are struggling. I get it. That's fair enough. However, please don't ignore the fact that when you increase wages, you also increase the cost of goods. That's why a lot of people want to buy goods from overseas, because manufacturing is cheaper. If Democrats and Labor parties and centre-left parties don't want to acknowledge that, why are you going to say, well, this thing's going to drive inflation, ignore the things that you do that drive inflation? Because if you're going to do that, if you're going to go down that path, you might as well say that the America First movement, which talks about bringing jobs back to America, will have an inflationary effect. It will, but the overall economy would be better, is the argument I think being made, would be better if those jobs were back in America. I mean, you've got to be somewhat honest about these things at some point.
Yeah, I definitely think he could have hit her harder on the, even brought up the fact that, yeah, look, of course I have policies. In fact, Kamala's stealing them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
there's a few pivots like that where he could have, he was asked, he has no plan, he has no this, he has no that. Well, actually, I have such a good plan that you're stealing the pointers. I just, and I don't want to be a downer on this. I hope there's another opportunity for him to go back to the phenomenal people. And, the guy's almost 80. I want to see him come back and give it another crack with these with Kamala. I hope they do another debate. He didn't want to do the ABC's debate. He wanted Fox to host it, and I think it's only fair that he's given she should, as a matter of honor, say look, we'll go to Fox and go from there. And they won't fact check in real time, Kamala. I think that it wasn't his best performance, and I'm not going to. And again, that's not going to do well with the viewers. I think there were some great key moments. What my hope is, trying to see the light in the clouds here, is I'm hoping that the mainstream media have gotten so small that only less than 10 million people actually watch this full thing, because that's usually the numbers, less than 10 mil usually. And I hope that some of those real cracker snippets about him saying, "You're in government, roll Biden out of bed, and do X, Y, Z." I think some of those crackers about him giving Kamala a Trump hat and all of that, I think that would do really, really well. And I'm hoping that a lot of the voters, especially the younger ones coming in, that's what they see.
In the Biden debate, Kamala Harris afterwards, when she was talking to Anderson Cooper, made the comment that it was a slow start, but it was a great finish. I think that Trump's performance was perhaps the opposite of that.
Yeah.
I think he ran out of zingers. He used up a lot of material in the first half, and then he kind of started, just tapering off a little bit. But I actually think that he did a great. I actually thought that was a good performance from him. I really do. I think that Kamala did quite well, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I really like the fact that he did appear to be a lot more restrained, which is what people have been asking for. And he did come back with some real zingers. I mean, there was one moment where he said something, she said something, I can't remember what it was that she said, and he went, well, that was just designed to be a soundbite. They gave her that. I mean, I thought it was good.
That was brilliant. See, that was brilliant. And look, I think that a lot of people, they did stay engaged in that. I was watching the numbers while we were live streaming the thing. We got up to something like 1,000 live viewers across the platforms. Just to put that in perspective, Steve Bannon's War Room was doing 5,000 on Rumble. So that's pretty good for little old Australia, which is 25 times smaller than America. Yep. But no, look, guys, thank you for everyone tuning in and giving this a share. Did you have any other thoughts? Again, we're not in a rush, but did you have any other thoughts on the debate? Because I feel like we pretty much covered most things.
Yeah, look, I'll just say, you mentioned Fox. If I was Kamala, she's never going to do this, but if I was Kamala, I would do what Gavin Newsom did and just ring up Fox and say, hey, listen, get Sean Hannity. I'm going to do a sit-down interview. To me, I don't think that what she's done today will be enough to win the election. The polls and the betting markets have changed, right? I don't think that's going to stay. I think it will flip back to him. So I think she needs to do something more if she wants to win this election, and I think Donald Trump just needs to continue doing what he's doing, right? I don't think he made any serious errors. It's not like the 2020 debate with Biden, which was just awful, right? It's not like that. And then he caught COVID. Like, that was just such an awful debate performance from him, and he couldn't do what he did in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. Yeah. But this, I thought, was actually pretty good. I will just say I had to laugh just the way that he said that, he sent a picture, and, Dole goes, "Why are you sending me a picture of my house in Afghanistan?" I just thought that was great. But it also shows that he's the kind of person that would, push people's buttons, that are adversarial towards the United States. The Afghanistan withdrawal, I think, was a disaster. Yeah. They left $200 billion or something, or $80 billion. I don't know what the figure was. It
was like more than our budget. I mean, they have more Apache helicopters than Australia.
Exactly.
Something crazy like that.
Like that just, I don't get it. And I seem to remember, and somebody can fact check this, didn't Biden give Putin a list of like 7 things or 14 things or something that you're not to attack?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Very early on in the conflict, he said, "Look, we won't interfere if it's a minor incursion."
Yeah,
so it's like, well, just gave him permission to do an incursion of a minor size. Yeah. Once you get kicked, things start kicking off. The truth dies after that. But no, looking at the, I felt Trump could have probably been more clear on the foreign policy. She took credit for, look, we withdrew out of Afghanistan. It's like, no, Trump triggered that. All you had to do was leave it and let the plan play out, and you've still found a way to stuff that up, basically. And on top of that, with regards to Ukraine, the idea that Trump didn't go harder and say no, because she said to him, "You're weak on Ukraine. Putin will eat you alive if you're president." And he should have basically come back and be like, "I was president. He didn't invade under me. In fact, he only invaded before me under Obama in 2014 with the annexing of Crimea, and then after under you guys. And so don't blame me for that. He never did anything with me, and he's the one that's endorsing you."
Well, look, again, I'm not actually a right winger. I'm quite a liberal kind of person, but I'm not sure that I would agree with that, because I think that when he says, "Hey, I will," and he said it quite a few times before as well, I would have the war ended between the Ukraine and Russia before I even become the president. I'll have that ended as president-elect. I think that people already believe that. Yeah. And in relation to Afghanistan, why bother correcting her? Nobody thinks that this was good. Even Democrats will actually say this is a real weak spot. So why bother correcting her? It doesn't need to be, because you run the risk of looking like a bully.
Yeah. I think some people were saying that he came across as a bit... I was getting a few texts during it. Some people were saying that he came a bit across as aggressive, and maybe the first mistake he made in the first Biden debate in 2020. I think some people are saying he did that as well with her, and he doesn't usually have a female debating partner.
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's been a while, but Hillary, if you think about it, you know why he was able to get around that? The power of having a live audience was amazing, because the live audience helps you outflank the commentators and the questioners, the unbiased questioners, because they laugh at the questioners. Even when there was a live audience and, they were laughing at him on certain things, he managed to turn that against the against them, and he was like, "See that's all of the Republicans' donors, the establishment guys." He had a way to bounce off people that would allow him to circumvent the commentators, because the commentators, they've got the audience behind them. I mean, it's a vulnerable position. So
I'd like to ask you a question though, because look, I thought. Look, he's an aggressive person in the first place, so I think that expecting him to be like Obama, for example, and be charming, or Bill Clinton, who was very charming and charismatic, that's not who he is. And if he was like that, it would look kind of fake. As I said, I don't really, I don't know, maybe I'm biased, maybe I've all of a sudden become some hard right-winger, but I'd like to ask you a question, if you don't mind. I think that Donald Trump won the debate, but I don't think the media will say that. And it's not like the last debate with Biden, where it was impossible for anybody to say that Biden won it. Who do you think won this debate?
It's hard to say. I won't know until... I mean, first off, it doesn't matter what I think.
You won't know until election night. That's great.
No, not at all. Give it a week. I want to monitor, see what goes viral, what doesn't. I want to see the response from people. I want to see what some of the left-wing commentators like Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks and some of the other left-wing on say.
They'll come out and scream and carry on. But do you notice that Alex Kasparian recently has started, like, hang on, that's not the position Republicans have. I mean, I'm halfway expecting her to flip at this point. I think she's a little bit fed up.
It's funny because I don't know why that's happened. I haven't watched enough of her recently in the last 4 years, but I think motherhood has really helped her have be rooted a bit more in reality, because once you have a baby, it's like, okay, my needs come second. And I think that's anathema to left-wing thinking. It's my needs come first. That's why they're comfortable, with not even saying ardently, yep, full-term abortion even after. That's wrong. We should do something about it. I think that, communism and democratic socialism, I think it breathes me. And I think that with her, it's just a matter of time. But I think she'll always retain that sort of left-wing background, a bit like Jimmy Dore. But she will go like the way Jimmy Dore is, and Tulsi Gabbard, yeah.
But it's very interesting because, you make that comment about when people have kids. And look, when people get older, they tend to move more towards the right anyway, from, perhaps naive ideals that they have when they're younger. But, who do you really trust to be about families? Is it Democrats or is it Republicans?
Yeah,
I think that Democrats are very top-down, right? And left-wing thinking today is very top-down. I mean, Paul Keating had a crack at John Howard many years ago when he's in Parliament, where he said something along the lines of, here's a man that goes on about families, but he doesn't believe in family support. That was pretty powerful. Now we've got things, I'm sort of going off the topic a bit, but like Anthony Albanese is talking about, putting restrictions on social media use. Now, I agree. I just don't think that he should be doing it. That shouldn't be government's job. Right, so the sort of overreach into parental rights, the overreach into, hey, I don't want my children to learn certain things at a certain age in school, and the government comes and says, no, you're going to have to. Like, that kind of overreach, I think, is offensive to families, because families, I believe, are the cornerstone of our countries, and the parents should be able to make decisions, whether we agree or not, within reason, should be able to make decisions for their kids. So Democrats aren't doing that. And that goes into that me, as opposed to thinking about a family unit.
Yeah, there's too many laws. I mean, the idea that, every time, I think it was Thomas Sowell who said this, every time if you see something wrong, you say there really ought to be a law against that. You hold freedom in very low regard, and you'll be strangled by those very laws that you've basically said, yeah, there ought to be. A man like that, he should never have been able to get behind the wheel of a car like that, or XYZ. Yeah. Eventually, you get tightened by this noose you've made for yourself. But going back to, because I don't want the audience to think that I'm dodging the question, I think Trump could have actually done way better, because I've seen him in other debates. I've seen him on with hostile commentators before. I think the commentators did make a big difference in this. Whether that lands or whether that, just as Trump being too aggressive with Biden or Kamala could hurt him, or did hurt him in 2020 with Biden, those commentators might have actually helped him by being too hard on him. And maybe people gave him a big pass. Now, I can't answer that, and it's actually, frankly, irrelevant what I think. But I just know that they asked him 4 or 5 fact checks. They said to him, no, it's like this. Anyway, Kamala, and then they would just pass by it. And whereas with her, there were clear at least 4 to 6 verifiable lies that, as you said, have been debunked by Politico, like the Charlottesville one and the death of the Capitol. I think it's disgusting the way that she can just get away with that, and the ABC moderators are like, yeah, no worries. But it might actually help Trump.
I think it might. In the last debate with Biden, there was a couple of points, I can't remember exactly what was asked, but he just didn't answer the question. I remember saying, screaming at the TV, going, answer the question. Yeah, but that is him. I think he did a better job. There was a point when Kamala Harris had sort of laughed, and then so you're not even answering the question or something, and just that moment I thought they looked like a couple getting divorced in front of the family court just at that moment. But look, there's a few things which I know are too subtle, I think, for anyone to bring up, but she talked a lot about wanting to raise and lift the middle class. Lift them to what? Because you hate the rich, according to you. You want to tax all the billionaires, according to you. So you want to lift them into the wealthy status and then take everything they've got. Is that the plan? I don't get their position. She also talks a lot about he wants to give tax cuts to billionaires. The thing with the United States is because of how progressive their tax system is, the top 10% of the country pays 50% of the taxes. The top 50% pays 90% of the taxes. Right. Any tax cut that you give is going to disproportionately affect the people that are disproportionately paying it. So if you want to make the argument that you want to keep taxes the same or increase them in order to redistribute wealth, which is how they used to describe this, then go and make that argument. But don't gaslight us all.
That's right.
As I said, I think whoever people think won this debate, I don't really think it's going to change anything. And because I don't think it's going to change anything, Trump was already looking like he was regaining the lead and he was likely to win. Based on that, if we all agree that nobody's mind would be likely to have been changed by this and swing voters may not be changed, may not have changed their minds, then I don't know why the betting markets have moved her into favouritism, because what happened just then that was so compelling that you go, oh, awesome.
Yeah, let's see. I want to bring up this point because I think you guys you will definitely like me bringing this up. I have the endorsement of 200 Republicans, she said, like Mitt Romney and a bunch of others. I thought that was hilarious how Trump replied. He said, I fired most of those people. That's right, all these rhinos. They didn't, whereas Kamala and Biden didn't fire anyone, especially associated with the Afghanistan withdrawal. You know, he said, I would have fired all the generals there that were associated. And I thought that was brilliant. I thought, you know, like, who cares if you got Republican? Like, of all the points you could have made, you could have said, like, all the unions support me, all the, mothers.
She can't say that because she started to lose some of the unions.
Right. Yeah.
Right? You had union people at the RNC.
Yeah.
The head of Slut Walk, whatever it was, from California, was at the RNC. I mean, she can't say that. But just on the Republican point, I thought that was actually a really weak thing for her to say in the first place.
Yeah, I don't know why she went there.
Because when Donald Trump came in back in 2016, he was this anti-establishment person, not just anti-establishment with Democrats, but he was anti-establishment within the Republicans. Right. So for her to say, hey, they've all backed me, so are you now saying, Kamala, that you are the establishment candidate? Is that what you're going with?
She was saying, Dick Cheney, all the names she rattled off, I think it was Bush as well. All these people were associated with the invasion of the Middle East. Yeah. And that's why I like that Trump brought up Afghanistan, because it's what immediately popped to my head when I heard those names, Dick Cheney and all of them, and George Bush. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that was a very good comeback from him. I think that that idea that she blamed him for Trump leaving them a mess and they haven't fixed it up in 3.5 years, but they can now. She's trying to have it both ways. It's like, well, do you defend and stand by Biden's, or not? And if you say yes or no, if you say no, then it's just like, well, why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you try and do X, Y, Z? If you thought he was in cognitive decline, then WTF. But if you do stand by it, then why can't you do it now? So she was kind of screwed either way, and that's what's really funny about the predicament she and the Democrats have put themselves in.
And what she can't. The thing that's really interesting about this is Republicans and right-wing media, I expect, are just going to smash her on that all the way into the election. But the thing is that she's not actually the president. No. He's done a good job of making her the president, but she's not. Yeah. So she actually can't really do some of the things that he's saying. She would actually require Biden to do it. So go wake Biden up or bring him back from the beach. But it's a powerful point, because he did what we said at the beginning. He tethered Biden's record to hers. Yeah. One thing I just want to say about Biden very quickly. He's been in politics in the United States for about 50 years, or 300 years according to him. Now, the United States has been around, I'm rounding these numbers, the United States has been around for about 250 years or so. It's about the same age as us. That means he's been involved in US politics for 20% of US history.
Shocking.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, but no, he can do it. He can do this stuff now.
Yeah.
That
he wasn't able to do before.
No, and her too. I mean, she had a very fancy way and very efficient way of putting it. The fact that she's been on the public dime for her whole career. She said, I've only ever had one client. The people. And I thought, no, your only client was you, and no one even called you out on how you actually rose through the ranks of the corporate world, which I won't go into. But there's some very interesting stuff with George,
Willie
Brown as well, which has surfaced.
Look, I want to just make a comment about her response to her values haven't changed. Right now, she's had a week or however long she's been practicing. She knew this was going to come up. fracking, you flip-flopped. Yeah, and the ABC reporter, Lindsay Davis, she did actually bring up a number of things that she flip-flopped on. I actually thought that Kamala Harris's answer was good. It was a good answer. It was a good response. But again, I don't think it's persuasive. I don't think people are going to be sitting at home going, yeah, like she flip-flops saying, oh, that was a good answer. Okay, I've changed my mind. I just think people are going to go either, yeah, cool, we're on a side, that's awesome, a great answer, or they're going to go, well, that just sounds like bull dust. And, that's just a politician double-talking us. So, yeah, I again, on those issues, Donald Trump tends to own what he says and does, whereas she doesn't. And there seems to be people aren't even prepared to acknowledge, Democrats aren't prepared to even acknowledge that, okay, yeah, we've changed our position on things.
Yeah. It was really interesting when a moderator, this was an unintentional thing, no doubt. One of the moderators, she was finishing up an answer and she said, that's why we need a president that will unify the country. And he's like, thank you, Vice President Kamala Harris. I thought that was one of the best points that Trump didn't make, that he was not involved in. They made it. It was hilarious because of the fact that you are sitting member. Also, I want to, before I forget, I want to mention that fact that he said that her father was a Marxist and her father taught her well. That was a great line.
It was.
I loved it.
And especially when, if you think back, she had made a comment about, there was some sort of question that was asked about marijuana, and she goes, hey, I'm Jamaican, and this and that, and her father came out and went, hang on a minute, that's not what we do, and that sort of stuff. I thought that was pretty good. Is there going to be, I'm not sure, are you aware of whether or not there will be a vice presidential debate?
I hope there will be. There usually is. I'm just keeping an eye out now, guys, because I can see Sean Hannity is sitting with Trump, but they haven't cut to that on Fox yet. But I'll keep an eye on that. But I'd be very curious to hear what his team and what the core people advising him are saying how that went. I always wonder what they say to each other in the breaks. Like we had 2 brief breaks on this, and I was just wondering, what they tell Kamala and what they tell Trump.
Yeah, very interesting. We actually missed the beginning, but they had a handshake. Now, unless I misheard or misunderstood, Kamala Harris said in the CNN interview, or Dana asked her, they've never met. That was actually the first time, unless I've misunderstood things, that was actually the first time that they've met.
That's amazing.
And I found that incredible.
Sorry, Rami, this is them meeting. This literally just came up as we were talking.
He would end that war on day one, or this debate extensively because they criticized the last debate extensively.
Total coincidence.
But it was very interesting. Yes, there are a number of issues that are tough to put into that format. Former President Trump has said that he would end that war on day one, or he would end it before he steps into office, depending on which speech you've heard.
Somebody must have told him. I know this is going to sound really petty.
Ukraine has come back and said, look, this thing is not going to end. Even Russia.
Yeah, they can hear us. Yeah.
This is going to sound really petty. Yeah. It really doesn't make a difference, but somebody must have told him what I said at the time.
Yeah.
When he came out with Biden and they didn't do the handshake, Biden comes out and waves at nobody and that sort of stuff.
Waves at nobody.
And then Trump comes out like some bloody cowboy with his jacket open and all this. I'm like, Trump, you're supposed to look presidential. What are you doing? Yeah. Here he came out. I thought he looked a bit more suave. He had his jacket buttoned up. He did the handshake, all that sort of stuff. I just thought from both of them. And actually, I think Kamala Harris looked pretty good.
Yeah. I think it worked well last time with Biden because it wasn't just when he got on the stage, but more importantly, when he got off the stage. You remember that footage from inside where Biden had to slowly be helped off, but he just walked off. Trump walked off like a boss.
Now, I was actually talking to friends of mine in America live, and they didn't know that Jill Biden actually took him off the stage. They didn't know that. I was like, but it's on the feed. And they're like, our feeds have ended. We could see it in Australia. So I actually switched over to my VPN and rewatched the same thing, and it was cut. And it wasn't until it came out in the media when you started to see the footage in the US. And I was like, wow, like Americans must be, when they hear things like that, they must feel so lied to and so betrayed by their media.
Yeah, especially when the little old Australians are sort of like, no, you guys, I have more truth than you. And then you show them with the receipts and it's like, crap.
I've got friends of mine that actually watch Sky News here a lot because they think that Sky News actually tells them stuff about America that American TV doesn't show them.
No, 100%. I think that's why Sky News Australia does so well on On YouTube, they do very, very well. It is a curious thing that they don't get more strikes, if I'm being honest, because I do talk about some of the very similar things that they do, and I've had 2 or 3 accounts get nuked. But
maybe Rupert Murdoch sorted it out. But was it them or I think it was them that they got a strike for comments about the vaccine and COVID that later on turned out to be true.
That's right. That's right. It was Alan Jones and it was Alan Jones and it was Craig Kelly, and they ended up losing. I mean, Craig was never invited back again, and Alan eventually lost his job. But they got a 1-week ban as a result. And by the way, anyone that knows anything about the internal workings of Sky News, they heavily rely, as they're part of their business model, on monetization. Okay. So they freaked out because they can't lose their YouTube. And at the same time, they were staring down the barrel when, in that year when it happened, 2021, they were staring down the barrel of a Rupert Murdoch Royal Commission, and they had people like Kevin Rudd going after them, and they needed to tone it down, just put it down for a second because, these things will go away, but, and so they use that as an opportunity, to get rid of Alan, to get rid of, and they'll say, look, we didn't get rid of Alan Jones, that's a fact check false. You gave him a different slot and you put Piers Morgan, of all people, in that slot.
I don't mind Piers Morgan, to be honest, but
he's all right.
But I got to say, Rita Panahi does that, lefties losing it. I think it's great, and I don't think they've got the equivalent kind of show in America, not on a mainstream thing. So, but yeah, look, I'll repeat everything I said there. I don't think that anything that happened there will be enough to change the election. So I'm surprised that the betting markets have changed, not the polls. Do you think that the US election, because we're all, we all sort of go through the same sorts of issues. We have some issues here in Australia. Do you think that Trump winning or not winning would affect potential, a potential election here? We're talking about having elections soon. There's a bit of unhappiness with Albo at the moment.
It depends. I think people are understating. I think the Patriots get it. Actually, no, I think Americans probably generally get it more than most people here. And I'm not saying you, I'm saying most people here. I think that the impact that the American election is going to have on the world is unclear. And when I say unclear, I'm not saying like the range of possibilities between this and this. I'm saying it's between this and this. And the future does hang in the balance. The idea that when America sneezes, Australia gets a cold, we're going to see some serious economic implications for everything in Australia as a result. And I hate that because I'm a big advocate of telling people that, not just pick yourself up by your bootstraps, but there are some things that are genuinely out of your control. All you can do is abide by those stoic values and deal with the cards that you've been dealt and play them as best you can. But at the same time, there are major things, there are major problems, there are major solutions as well that are coming out of America because we personally don't have enough billionaires or millionaires to fund them. And Americans do generally have a much better per capita. They do tend to be more philanthropic with regards to how they put their money out there. And so when I see the freedom movement over there, for lack of a better word, it's probably a lot better equipped there, but they are exporting a lot of problems. A lot of our main problems are coming out of America, are like our Stripe account being cancelled with a tour previously, or even our social media getting nuked, and there's no recourse for us. Whereas in America they do have recourses. They are building their own platforms, which we're benefiting of. So look, it's hard to state the significance it could have in terms of election significance. Of course it's going to affect our elections if it's Trump or Kamala, and the range of possibilities are that big. And we see a situation where Biden is, Albanese, our Prime Minister, is in a better position or weaker position. It might even be why he goes early or waits a bit longer. But at this stage in time, it looks like he's going to run the clock down to May next year.
I think if you look at Brexit, there was a bit of a move towards the right. At the same time, roughly around about the same time, you're seeing Trump become the president, and around about the same time, you see ScoMo win the election that was, that we're going to call him Chris Bowen,
the unwinnable election.
The unwinnable election.
That's right.
From recently retired
Bill Shorten.
Bill Shorten.
Yeah, funny guy. He said he had no regrets. Can I just say he had no regrets? and I was just thinking about that time with Arnold Schwarzenegger where he said, I'm going to be the next Prime Minister of Australia. Sorry.
That was pretty bad. The way that Arnold Schwarzenegger looked at him. It was
he's just like,
But what we've seen is, I don't think that we've actually seen a push to the left. And I think that people, or the political pundits that say there's a push to the left, it's not really there. If I can say, look, the last election, right, it was pretty obvious that the Liberals were going to lose it here, right? Look, they've been there for 9 years. It's very hard to say, give us another 3 years to do what we haven't done in the last 9. That's a hard thing to do.
Like
it was
Kamala.
probably time for a change.
Yeah.
And things go in cycles. You have a look at the UK. The Tories have been there for quite a long time. I think that they've probably let down a lot of the people who voted for them that would never have voted against Labor any other time. Again, very obvious that they were going to lose. But is that a push to the left? Well, I would say no, because Albo only got in with, like, was it 33% or something of the primary vote? So
right.
7 out of 10 Australians didn't vote for him. And what's very interesting is that there is some quirks in the UK system. If you actually have a look at the raw numbers, the Labor Party didn't actually do that well. The Tories did terribly, but the Labor Party didn't actually do that well. There wasn't some massive increase in their support. So that doesn't indicate to me that the majority of people want to go to the left. Right. And it, I think, comes down to you vote some people out. Yep. This is a very interesting situation in the US because it's a unique one. We've never seen two former presidents in our lifetimes or in recent history go against each other. We've never seen a debate between a president and a sitting, or a former president and a sitting vice president. So a very unique set of circumstances.
Yeah.
And I'm not persuaded that the people that live in Western countries are actually moving to the left. But this election, I think, will highlight that.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I do hope there's another debate. I do hope that America can find its way out of the cultural malaise they've found themselves in. But at the same time, I am very encouraged because the anti-government sort of libertarian conservative wing are consolidating. I mean, we're seeing that with Tulsi Gabbard and Elon's Musk and also RFK Jr. I think the idea that they're coming together, and RFK, I just saw him yesterday come out and say, it doesn't matter which state you're in, vote Trump. Because previously he was saying in the safe states where it's going to be 100% Republican or Democrat, I can still vote for me there. And in the swing states, vote Trump. He scrapped that now. He said, doesn't matter what state you're in, I'm telling you to go vote Trump. And so it's going to be very fascinating to see how that pans out. But it's good to see that they've had that come to Jesus moment with the right-wing movement, the anti-establishment left-wing movement, has basically turned a lot of people against them. And who knows, maybe people like Anna Kasparian will vote for Trump. You know, I've seen stranger...
She may not admit it, but yeah, she might. Can I just come back on something? The left-wing anti-establishment movement, I find that fascinating because, you know, I'll just do very quickly, we just want to acknowledge that for them in America, it's the 10th of September, but everywhere else in the world, or certainly most of the world, it's the 11th. So it's the 23rd anniversary of September 11. I'm surprised that wasn't actually brought up at some point in the debate because national security is an issue.
Yeah, they usually do.
Yeah. So when you have a look at... I've actually completely lost my train of thought, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry. So you were talking about the fact there's the 10th over there, 10th of September. But I was making the point about Anna Kasparian being the left-wing establishment.
When you have a look at people that say that they're left-wing anti-establishment, now, largely because of September 11, Michael Moore made some documentaries, things like that. So when I was younger, I was kind of like, hey, I'm kind of anti-government. I don't want too much government control. And then all of a sudden, you know, you had things like the Patriot Act in America and all these sorts of things. And I kind of thought that a left position was he wanted less government. And now you've got people who are saying that they're on the... all of a sudden, I'm on the right. And then you, on the left, being anti-establishment, you're anti-establishment who wants more regulations and higher taxes. Have I missed something?
Yeah, they've changed. They were bought out. That's when the switch happened, 2011. That's when it happened. You know, Obama was voted in by many of these people, like Tulsi, like Anna Kasparian, like all of these people that have flipped now. You know, probably even RFK, because they were voting for change. And when they realised that their vote led to the bombing of innocent people in the Middle East, these anti-war people were like, that's it. I'm not voting for him. So a lot of them didn't vote in the next time. So we got less votes the next time. And so now we find ourselves with strange bedfellows on the right-wing movement. It's become more of an anti-establishment reactionary movement. But they were bought out in 2011. These big corporations, the long march through the institutions, really did reach the boardroom and really did come in with all these quotas, and they picked us apart like cotton candy.
So Obama's debate performance wasn't the greatest, but she brought up the late, great John McCain. And I'm always fascinated when Democrats do this. They say, oh, you know, he was great. Colin Powell, fantastic. Really? Because at the time you didn't say that. At the time you went after John McCain. At the time you went after Colin Powell. And Michael Moore in his movie says that Colin Powell went in and misled the Security Council. I believe it was the ABC, it could have been a different media outlet here, that did that documentary on what things were known by intelligence agents in Australia, and some of those agents said, well, we were looking at that satellite footage and going, wait, that's not what that is. So at the time, Democrats weren't saying anything nice about Colin Powell, but now that Colin Powell's not in politics anymore, they are all saying, well, we want there to be a return to the GOP, to the normal GOP. Yeah. No, you don't. You're not going to vote for him.
That's right. Yeah, with McCain, with Romney, it was a very nice face version, and they attacked him. They called them racist. They insinuated, Obama, when he couldn't get bills passed, he insinuated the Republicans there, including those ones who were racists. And the Republican Party, this was the big lesson out of 2016, they then elected someone that would punch back, because it was the left that did that. And I really felt Trump could have hammered that home a bit more. You guys were the ones, historically, that actually did this. You are the reason why this country can't come together, and we've had 3.5 years of you guys in leadership. So everything you're saying right now is null and void because you haven't done it.
Yeah, we're not to play the devil's advocate, because it sounds like I'm just being a Trump, Trumpy supporter. But look, this debate at other times, it's like, well, Democrats, you've done this, and then the Democrats come and go, no, you did that, and it's like, well, you guys in year 3? Yeah. No, it's you. Well, you said, well, I know you are. So what am I? I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, I don't know. I'm going to tell you, it's the first time I'm going to say something like this, but if I was American after watching this, I think it would be very difficult for me to vote for Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
I really do.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I'm so out of touch with people that there's the majority of Americans are going to vote for her. Yeah, especially when he rightly points out that he had 75 million votes or 76 million votes or something, and Biden had 81, if we believe that. But there's no evidence yet that that's not true.
Don't get me started on that.
Well, that's a whole new show. But that's he did have that many votes. Going back to that, the figures were that if he got more than 63, he wouldn't lose. Is she going to have 70, 80 million votes? Is that what we're expecting? I just can't see it. I don't think the turnout's going to be there for either of them at that level. But I just don't see people being that enthusiastic about it. Unless I'm missing something with everything that you've said, that you didn't think it was that great a performance from him, I just don't see him losing votes.
Yeah, I really do think that concept I mentioned earlier is going to come in. They're going to vote the government out. No one liked Biden. It was within a few months he had the whole country against him, even the left-wingers, are against him, especially now on the Palestine stuff, because they didn't vote him in. They voted Trump out. And and that's not, doesn't count for nothing. Obviously, I have my questions around the legitimacy of the 2020 election and the fact that they didn't actually play out the whole process and the four, just different types of discrepancies that we saw. But the idea that Kamala and Biden didn't say, yeah, look, no, we should do it. We need confidence in democracy, and I just want them to espouse the values they said on the stage. That's it. But they won't do it. They're gaslighting people.
I actually don't. I actually hope that Kamala doesn't follow the values that she's espoused on the stage, giving $25,000 grants and all this sort of stuff to new homeowners. But there is another thing that I would say, Donald Trump, we know what he's going to do, right? It's predictable. And, we've already seen him. Kamala Harris, we haven't. So what do we know about Kamala Harris? She's been out there saying, right up until the last possible moment, that Joe Biden was great. He's alert. He's the last one in the room. He's smart. He's energetic, right? Karine Jean-Pierre. oh, his staff have problems keeping up with him. That's stuff that was used to be said about Donald Trump. Now all of a sudden, and the gaslighting. No, he didn't fall down the stairs. The wind blew him over. I mean, I think that there's a credibility problem there. Democrats will say, well, yeah, but Trump lies all the time. Yeah, fine, whatever. The fact of the matter is that you guys won't even admit or acknowledge anything. And what you're asking Americans to do is to put trust in Kamala Harris, who's basically lied to everybody for years about the condition of Joe Biden. And she was asked by a reporter at one point, I think it was an ABC reporter, who said, would you, if the situation was bleak enough, would you actually invoke the 25th Amendment? And she sort of tried to evade the question and said, well, yeah, I guess. And also, look at the last handful, the Justice Smollett thing, look at the things that have happened over the last few years. It's just, again, people will vote for her if they're going to... I think the people that will vote for her would have voted for the Democrats no matter who they put up. I don't see other people being enthralled. I could be wrong. Most of my political predictions are, but...
No, most of mine are correct. The only one I got wrong was the... with 2020. That was the only one. All the Aussie ones have been right. The American ones are right. It was just that 2020.
Did you get 16 correct?
I got 16 correct.
Did you?
No, I did. I didn't. I was so disillusioned. I'm not an American. It's so funny. I was so disillusioned with the country I've never been to that I followed their political process as a hobby. I was disillusioned with the way that Bernie was treated. Obviously, I heard everyone's assumption that Trump was gonna lose. But I thought, look, I don't know, because it just seems as though couldn't see those Bernie people getting out and voting for Kamala, for Hillary, white Kamala. But
you're absolutely correct, because Bernie supporters, I think, have every right, or had every right, to feel ripped off by that process, because you had, I think it was Washington State, I may have the state wrong, where their votes were overridden by delegates and superdelegates. So you say you're following democracy. Your party's called the Democrats. That's not flying.
Right.
Also Democrats, because their political process is just so bruising. I'd hate to run for politics there or anywhere, but especially there. But they spent all this time, Democrats, telling everybody how terrible Hillary Clinton was, and then all of a sudden, you've got to vote for her. Hang on a minute. So, of course, that was going to be off-putting, but I didn't see Donald Trump winning it. I got that one really wrong. Right. That's the thing with this. You don't have an open convention. You install this new candidate. People, including Democrats, were not happy about that. They were concerned about it. You've ignored that. And what has happened? Democrats were talking about whether or not maybe they should replace her on the ticket under Biden. She's not popular. She's not well liked. She had terrible approval ratings, and then overnight she's a superstar. How could there be that seismic shift in attitudes? I don't think there is. I think media's exaggerating it. I think we're being lied to. That's why I don't think she'll win.
I think with Bernie, just to close that part off, I think that the reason why we saw 10% of Bernie Sanders voters end up voting for Trump in 2016 was the fact that these people were more enthusiastic about Bernie than they were about I almost said Kamala Harris,
Kamala Clinton or something,
white Kamala Harris, and I just felt that the people that get things done weren't going to show up and do the work. We've seen similar situations more recently in Australia. To take America out of it, this as a case study, in New South Wales, we saw members vote in democratically for Liberal members, not just for council. There are 140 for council, but also we saw it in the 2022 federal election. We saw 13 seats where they had their candidate ready to go. There was no proper primary that ended up being held. There were people that were parachuted into these 13 seats in the last federal election for women candidates to fix the perceived women problem in the Liberal Party, and they lost all of those seats except one. And that same thing happened in local councils recently, which is why people are probably wondering why Joel backs the Greens and Labor. It's not because I like them. It's because there's literally no one else on the ballot, because the Liberals failed to submit 140 candidate sheets, including about 25 that were sitting councillors. And so you know, when you see that, do you really think the people that were supporting those democratically pre-selected people or primaried people, do you think that they're going to show up for the captain's picks like in 2022? And they won't. And so I saw that these are the movers and shakers. They were the enthusiastic ones under Bernie, and there needed to be a come to Jesus moment with you know, he should have been her vice president. That should have been what was the ticket. It didn't happen. And they used the superdelegate system rather than him getting a lot of the delegate votes, and 16 million votes as well, you know, from voters in all these primaries. And the superdelegates, they had this stupid constitution for the Democrats, so they just overrode it. And so I saw that firsthand. And I was like, well,
so look, she should have been his VP, or he should have been hers, because because the Democrats put themselves in a hole. You can't go from a black guy and then bypass the woman to go to a white guy, right? So what could they? It was an enormously difficult position for them. But just to your point there about Greens and Labor. Now, I've never voted for the Greens. I would be comfortable saying I cannot imagine ever voting for them. I've never voted for the Labor Party. I could. That's certainly possible. I haven't as yet. But in a situation where those parties are doing things that I'm not happy with, where I don't agree with them, but my own parties, like the Liberal Party's just doing something, or the Nationals, but I don't vote, I don't live in their areas. If the Liberal Party's doing something and I'm just really unhappy about it, I think, and it's just me, I think I'd rather not vote. I think I'd rather cop the fine.
Yeah, a lot of people do that.
Yeah, because
that's right.
Because I can't vote. I can't vote in something I don't like as a protest against what I think is my party's, the parties I support, not doing the right thing.
Yeah, and look, there are some areas where if that was an option, we would do that. But unfortunately, one, that's illegal. Like in terms of, I can't advertise a how to vote card to do that. People can vote, and they'll just cop the whatever fine, $55 or $200 fine. But on top of that, I don't want to encourage a culture of not voting, because we'll end up like the UK, where 58% of the population that's eligible to vote end up voting. So we have like 40% that aren't voting, and they've got only themselves to represent, even when they have a viable option. I don't like that culture being established.
I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, but it's a movement.
But I think a no vote is a vote. If you're forced to vote, you go down there and you put a blank ballot in. That says something to them as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the state election in WA, where the Liberals lost everything, right? I mean, they lost my area, and I live in when I was living in Perth, it's a blue area, it's a blue ribbon area. I can understand why they lost, but it was such a catastrophic loss for the Liberals. And honestly, I'm so glad that I wasn't living in Western Australia at the time, because I have no idea. I couldn't possibly have voted for the Liberal Party at that moment. But I just couldn't vote for the Labor Party.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
At that time either.
I think there should be a box. I think having mandatory voting is good. I think there should be a box, at the very bottom, which says none of the above, so that we can register that properly and people don't have to get fined as a revenue-raising thing. Yeah. But I think the system we have here is very good, because I think it's a very bad situation to have what's happened in the UK.
Now, we probably can't really answer this question, but if you did have such a box, what would you do? Because I would dare suggest, this is my take on things, that people are so unhappy with politics on all sides. People are saying around the world that they feel like they're politically homeless. If you did have a box that said no candidate, right, I don't want any of them, I think the overwhelming majority would actually tick that box. I don't think anybody would vote.
I think that would force candidates to work harder and actually work for it and be creative and actually not just do what they've always done. I think it needs a shake-up. I think there needs to be, reform, 100%.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with
you. But with that said, I think we should probably wrap it up for our audience. If you're part of the handful of people still watching, it's probably not. It's probably more like, it's probably dropped from 1,000 to about 400.
We've bored everybody to death, have we?
No, not at all. I think the clips will do very well. If you want to support the show, keep this stream going, please scan that code. It'll take you to the latest episode of the Ark Podcast, but also if you want to donate to support the show, it helps a lot with the actual financing of the show and for the switcher guy and the editor. But also if you want to get your copy of the Light Australian newspaper, we're going to run out very soon of that recent edition 13, which was very well received. And I'm looking forward to coming back very soon. I mentioned the How to Vote cards. If you're in New South Wales, the How to Vote cards are up. You have until today, till Saturday, to vote in the early elections. You can go to tpaust.com.au, and I've done a full video on that particular explaining the How to Vote cards and how they were made, thanks to the audience. But if you are in Victoria, with your election coming up very soon, I do believe early voting starts in a week. And you have early voting for 5 weeks. The election's not actually until the 26th of October, but there's early voting for 5 weeks, which is nuts, and it's very grueling, and I'm happy I'm not a candidate in that. But we will be doing How to Vote cards for that, as assuming we can get the data. And if you want to help us with that, please do reach out to us at elections@tpaust.com.au. And if you don't like the recommendation that's been made by someone that sent it to us, send me an email there. Let me know how you want to vote and why, and the track record for some of the people. It's not set in stone, and it's a very long early voting period, so there's going to be plenty of time to make it as best as possible to your values. But also, the Queensland election's on the 26th of October. I think there's 1 or 2 weeks of early voting up there. And the ACT election, if you want me to do How to Vote cards for there, please let me know, because I'm not sure if we should. We do have a lot of people that live there that vote there with our cards, but I just want to double check, because we will need the data to do that for their state election. But other than that, Shakeel, I want to get you back for the the presidential election on November 5th, America time, so that we can actually dissect exactly what is going on. I think live streams like this are critical, because it tells us exactly what happens on election night. It'll probably be a long one, so we're going to have a lot of people cycling in and out, and it'd be great to have at least you as part of that cycle.
I think we need popcorn and something to drink, a whiskey.
Something heavy.
Because it's going to be one interesting night.
100%. And one thing that's to our advantage is we start at 11 a.m. Sydney time, East Coast. So that allows us to actually, go longer than perhaps the Americans. I know Charlie Kirk did like an 18-hour stream, which was nuts. But anyway, guys, apologies if I seemed a bit low energy today. I was just in Canberra, and I've been travelling for about 2 weeks. Very tired, very sunburnt, and I'm not sure if any kind of weapon was actually used against me when I was in Canberra, like last time when we did the Canberra protests, and they used those LRAD sound things, wave things on us. But I will let you guys go. And by the way, it's not a conspiracy theorist. That is not a conspiracy theorist. You should watch Malcolm Roberts talking to the head of police in the ACT, and he actually questions him on it, and they did end up using it. I took photos and videos of it. So I'm going to let you guys go. God bless you, and I'll see you likely on Friday, but maybe next week for the next episode. I might have Augusto Zimmerman flying in from WA, Professor Augusto Zimmerman, on Friday for midday, but I may not release that till early next week. But anyway, thank you so much. God bless you. Have a good one, and thank you for supporting the content.